It was just another busy morning for Jennifer Adams, the CEO of a rapidly growing tech company. She was a woman known for her straightforward approach, always balancing humility with an unyielding sense of leadership. Jennifer wasn't one to flaunt her position. She didn't wear flashy clothes or make a spectacle of herself. She preferred to focus on what truly mattered, the work. Whether she was in meetings, on a conference call, or traveling for business, Jennifer kept it simple. She always went the extra mile for her company and expected nothing less from others. Today, she was flying out of a city after attending a major tech conference. It had been a whirlwind trip, filled with keynote speeches, business meetings, and networking events. Now, all she wanted was to relax on her flight home. As a frequent business traveler, Jennifer was accustomed to the comforts of first-class seats, especially when flying long distances. But she also knew that a first-class ticket was more than just luxury. It was about being able to rest and recharge before diving back into work. Jennifer arrived at the airport with just enough time to get through security, grab a coffee, and head to her gate. She was ready to get on the plane, put on her noise-canceling headphones, and catch up on some emails. But as she approached the counter to check in, something unusual happened. The airline representative looked at her boarding pass and frowned slightly. Jennifer didn't think much of it at first. She'd had the occasional issue with overbooking or minor changes to the schedule before. But today, things weren't going as smoothly as usual. "We've had an overbooking situation, Miss Adams," the agent said. "Unfortunately, your first-class seat has been assigned to someone else. We've arranged a seat for you in business class." Jennifer blinked in surprise, trying to process what was happening. She'd never experienced anything like this before, especially not on a flight where she had a first-class ticket booked well in advance. She had flown with this airline many times, and in her experience, they had always been accommodating. But today, that wasn't the case. "I understand that things happen," Jennifer said with a calm tone. "But I've been booked." The plane continued to soar through the sky, and Jennifer's mind was still racing. She had hoped that the situation would be resolved, but it seemed like no one was taking her seriously. She had already spoken as the plane touched down on the runway, the hum of the engine slowly faded, replaced by the usual sounds of passengers gathering their belongings and preparing to disembark. Jennifer sat still in her seat, her thoughts still processing the events that had unfolded over the last few hours. She had hoped that the situation would be resolved while still in the air, but as she glanced at the flight attendants, she knew that wasn't going to happen. The flight crew had failed to meet even the basic expectations, and Jennifer wasn't about to let that slide. The moment the plane came to a complete stop at the gate, Jennifer took a deep breath and stood up. She had made up her mind she was going to take this issue further. She wasn't one to back down when it came to matters of respect, professionalism, and service. As a CEO, she understood that sometimes, taking action was the only way to bring about real change. And that was what she intended to do. As the passengers began to file out of the plane, Jennifer remained seated, her focus sharp. She knew that this wasn't just about a single seat or one flight. It was about ensuring that companies and their employees knew what it meant to serve customers properly. She wasn't just a customer, she was someone who expected excellence in all areas of her life, and today, that hadn't been delivered. After a few minutes, Sarah, the senior flight attendant, appeared again, this time with a slightly apologetic expression on her face. "Miss Adams, I just want to say again how sorry we are for the situation today," Sarah began, her voice quieter than before. Jennifer stood up, her posture calm but firm. "Sarah, I appreciate the apology, but the fact is, nothing has been done to resolve this. I was made to feel like my concerns didn't matter, and that's something I can't accept." Sarah looked down for a moment, as if she were trying to find the right words. "I understand," she said slowly. "I just want to reassure you that we'll make sure your feedback is passed along to our management team." I can't promise anything, but I know they take these kinds of issues seriously. Jennifer nodded, but the lack of concrete action still nagged at her. I don't want promises, Sarah. I want to know that something is going to change. This can't be swept under the rug. It's not just about me, but about every passenger who gets treated like they don't matter. Sarah's eyes met Jennifer's, and for a moment, there was a glimmer of understanding in her gaze. I understand your frustration, she said quietly. And I'll make sure to pass it on to the right people. Thank you, Jennifer replied, though her voice lacked the warmth it might have carried in a more relaxed conversation. I expect a follow-up, Sarah. This is something I'll be pursuing until I know it's been dealt with properly. With that, Sarah gave a small nod and turned to walk away. Jennifer watched her go, her mind already moving forward. The flight was over, but the work wasn't done yet. Jennifer wasn't one to let things slip through the cracks. She had a reputation for handling matters head-on, and this was no different. As she exited the plane, Jennifer was met by the usual hustle and bustle of the airport. Passengers were rushing toward baggage claim, chatting with friends, and making their way to other gates. It was a normal, everyday scene, but Jennifer couldn't help but feel a sense of disconnect. Today had reminded her of how important it was to stand up for herself, for her company, and for anyone else who might find themselves in the same position. She had made her voice heard, and now, she needed to make sure that the airline heard it too. As she walked toward the customer service desk, Jennifer's phone buzzed in her pocket. She pulled it out to find an email from her assistant, updating her on some important meetings that would need her attention in the coming days. She quickly read through the email, making mental notes of her schedule. But even as she did, a part of her mind remained focused on the events of the flight. She had been treated poorly, and it wasn't just about the seat, it was about the attitude that had been displayed. That needed to change. When Jennifer reached the customer service desk, she was greeted by a polite young woman who smiled at her. "Good afternoon, ma'am. How can I assist you today?" "I need to file a complaint," Jennifer said, her voice steady. "And I want to make sure it gets to the right people." The woman nodded, quickly pulling up a form for Jennifer to fill out. "Of course, ma'am. I'll make sure it's sent to our customer relations team immediately." Jennifer took a moment to fill out the form, making sure to detail the issues she had experienced. She wrote about the overbooking, the lack of respect, and the unprofessional attitude of the flight crew. She didn't hold back. It wasn't about being harsh, it was about making sure that the airline understood how serious the situation was. Once the form was submitted, the customer service agent assured Jennifer that her complaint would be forwarded directly to the airline's senior management. "You'll hear from someone soon," she said. "We take all feedback seriously." Jennifer gave a small nod. "I expect to." As she left the customer service desk, Jennifer felt a weight lift off her shoulders. She had done what she needed to do. The next steps were out of her hands, but she knew she had made her voice heard. And that was important. Whether or not the airline took immediate action, she knew that her feedback would contribute to something bigger, a push for better service, for accountability, and for treating customers with the respect they deserved. The next few days were a blur of meetings, emails, and phone calls, but Jennifer never forgot about the incident. She stayed on top of her follow-up, making sure that the airline responded to her complaint. It wasn't about being difficult, it was about ensuring that the situation was handled the right way. She didn't want anyone else to go through what she had experienced. She wanted to make sure that customers were treated the way they should be, with professionalism and respect. Finally, a week later, Jennifer received a formal apology from the airline. The letter was detailed, acknowledging the mistakes made by the flight crew and outlining the steps that would be taken to address the issues. Jennifer was pleased to see that the airline was taking her complaint seriously, but she knew that real change would take time. For Jennifer, This wasn't about winning or losing, it was about making a difference. She had stood up for herself, and in doing so, she had set a standard for the way people should be treated. And that, in the end, was the most important thing. The supervisor and the crew had shown little interest in doing anything to fix the problem. But Jennifer wasn't the type to give up easily, especially when she knew she was in the right. She had been calm, polite, and patient, but the crew's behavior was becoming increasingly unprofessional. She knew it was time to take action. The flight continued its steady course through the sky, and Jennifer sat in her seat, trying to focus on the task at hand. Her thoughts kept drifting back to the interaction with the flight crew. She had been calm, patient, and reasonable, but there was something in the way they handled her request that bothered her. They were so dismissive, as if her concerns didn't matter at all. Jennifer wasn't the kind of person who liked confrontation, but she knew when something wasn't right, and this situation wasn't right. It had been more than an hour since she had asked to speak with the captain. She hadn't heard back yet, and the lack of response only deepened her frustration. She wasn't used to being ignored. As a CEO, she was accustomed to being heard and respected. She had worked hard to build her reputation and business, and she expected others to show the same level of respect. Jennifer glanced at her watch. The plane would be landing soon, and she needed to be prepared. She didn't want to make a scene, but she knew she couldn't let this go. This wasn't just about getting the seat she had paid for, it was about holding people accountable for their actions. The flight crew had shown a clear lack of professionalism, and that couldn't go unaddressed. She wasn't about to let this slide. The flight attendants moved up and down the aisle, chatting among themselves as they served passengers. Their laughter and casual banter felt out of place. Jennifer watched them for a moment, wondering if they even realized how much they had taken for granted. This wasn't just another flight for her. It was an experience, and she expected it to be handled with respect and care. Yet, she felt like just another passenger, one of many who were all treated the same, disposable. She didn't like feeling this way. She had worked her entire career to ensure that she never had to put up with being treated as anything less than what she deserved. The whole situation made her feel like her time and money didn't matter. She had been more than patient, and now it was time for action. Just then, Sarah, the senior flight attendant, appeared again. This time, she looked slightly more serious. There was no forced smile, no nervousness in her posture, just a calm, almost resigned demeanor. Jennifer stood up as she approached, her expression still composed but firm. "Miss Adams, I've spoken with the captain," Sarah began, her voice steady but lacking any warmth. "Unfortunately, there's nothing we can do to change the seating arrangements at this time. I'm very sorry for the inconvenience." Jennifer didn't miss the lack of urgency in Sarah's words. The apology was polite, but it felt hollow. She had been expecting something more, something that showed they took her concerns seriously. But here she was, once again, being told that the problem couldn't be solved, and that wasn't good enough. "I understand that you've spoken with the captain, but this isn't just about the seating," Jennifer said, her voice calm but clear. "This is about how the situation has been handled from the start. I've been patient, and I've asked for a resolution, but no one is doing anything to fix the problem." Sarah shifted uncomfortably, her hands clasped in front of her. "I completely understand your frustration, Miss Adams. We've had a lot of overbooking issues today, and it's been difficult to manage. I'm truly sorry for how this has turned out." Jennifer's patience was starting to wear thin. "This isn't just about overbooking. It's about how I've been treated. From the moment I stepped up to the counter, I was given no respect, and that's not something I will tolerate. I don't care about the overbooking situation. What I care about is the lack of professionalism from your team." Sarah's face flushed slightly, but she remained silent. Jennifer could see the conflict in her eyes. She was stuck in a position where she couldn't really do anything to make it right, but that didn't absolve her of the responsibility to take the situation seriously. Jennifer took a deep breath, trying to keep her emotions in check. She knew that getting angry wasn't going to solve anything. But she also knew that she couldn't just let this go without making sure it was addressed. She had worked too hard in her life to let people disrespect her, no matter who they were. "I need you to understand something," Jennifer said, her voice steady but intense. "This is not about just me. This is about the principle of the situation. I'm a paying customer, and I expect to be treated with respect. I don't care about the inconvenience. What matters is that I've been ignored, I've been brushed aside, and that's unacceptable." Sarah looked at her, her expression softening for the first time. "I'm really sorry, Miss Adams. I know this is frustrating for you, and I truly wish I could do more. But as I've told you, I don't have the authority to change anything mid-flight." Jennifer nodded slowly, understanding that Sarah was just doing her job, but that didn't make the situation any less frustrating. "I don't want to keep going in circles," Jennifer said. "What I want is a solution. I don't want promises of customer service once we land. I want something done now." There was a long pause as Sarah processed Jennifer's words. Jennifer could see that she was trying to come up with a response that would ease the tension, but there was nothing left to say. The situation was clear. Jennifer wasn't going to let this go, and she wasn't going to accept the empty apologies anymore. "I'm going to take this up with the airline once we land," Jennifer said firmly. "I'm not doing this for myself, but for everyone who might find themselves in the same position. This is about holding people accountable." Sarah nodded, though it was clear that there was little she could do at this point. "I understand, Miss Adams. I'll make sure that your concerns are passed on to the right people when we land." Jennifer sat back down in her seat, the conversation finally over, but her thoughts continued to swirl. She knew that the situation wasn't going to be easily fixed, but she wasn't going to let it go without making sure her voice was heard. As the plane continued its journey toward the airport, Jennifer felt a sense of resolution. She had done what she could, and now it was time for the airline to do its part. She was more determined than ever to make sure that this didn't happen to anyone else. She wasn't just a passenger. She was someone who understood the value of accountability, and she knew that sometimes, you had to take a stand to make sure that standards were met. This wasn't just about one flight, it was about making sure that people knew they couldn't treat others as though they didn't matter. As the plane descended toward its destination, Jennifer felt a small sense of satisfaction. She knew that she had done what she needed to do. It wasn't about winning or losing, it was about standing up for what was right. Jennifer didn't want to cause a scene. That wasn't her style. But she also understood that leadership wasn't just about making decisions when things were going well. It was about stepping up and doing the right thing when the situation was difficult. And right now, she wasn't getting the level of service she had paid for. It wasn't just about the seat anymore, it was about how the crew had treated her and how they had mishandled the situation from the start. She stood up from her seat and walked down the aisle toward the galley. The flight attendants were still busy, moving up and down the aisle, serving drinks and snacks to the passengers. They were moving in a routine, as if everything was perfectly fine. But for Jennifer, everything was far from fine. She could feel the tension in the air as she walked closer to the galley. She had been quiet for so long, but now, she was ready to make herself heard. One of the flight attendants, a tall woman with short blonde hair, glanced up at her and gave a quick, nervous smile. But Jennifer didn't return the smile. Instead, she calmly asked, "Is the senior flight attendant available? I'd like to speak with her again." The woman nodded and disappeared into the back to fetch Sarah, the senior flight attendant. Jennifer stood there, her arms crossed, as she waited. Her thoughts kept turning over the same frustration. She had paid for first class. She had made arrangements. She had planned for comfort and rest on this flight, and now that plan had been disrupted by poor customer service. But that wasn't the end of it. What really bothered Jennifer was the lack of accountability. She knew that her business, her company, had grown because she held herself and her team to the highest standards. She expected the same from others. When Sarah finally appeared, she looked a bit more tense than before. The flight attendant smiled, but it wasn't the same confident smile she had given earlier. Now, Jennifer could see the strain in her eyes. Sarah had clearly realized that this wasn't going to be a simple conversation. "How can I assist you, Miss Adams?" Sarah asked, her voice still smooth, but now with a hint of hesitation. Jennifer looked her in the eye and spoke with clear intent. "I'm not going to accept the situation as it is. I paid for a first-class seat, and I expect to have it. I've asked for your help, and I've been patient, but nothing has been done to resolve the issue." Sarah looked taken aback for a moment, then nodded slowly. "I understand, and I do apologize, Miss Adams. But as I explained, we've had an overbooking situation. I can't make any changes to the seating arrangements mid-flight." Jennifer could feel her frustration rising again. She had already heard that explanation, and it wasn't enough. "I'm aware of the overbooking," she said, her voice firm but still calm. "What I'm asking for is a resolution. I'm not just any passenger. I've been a loyal customer to this airline for years, and I expect better service than this." Sarah seemed to shift uncomfortably at her words. Jennifer could see that she was struggling to come up with a satisfactory response. She wasn't angry, but her disappointment was growing. She knew that leadership required taking responsibility, and it was clear to her now that the flight crew wasn't taking responsibility for the situation. "I've been waiting for over an hour, and all I've gotten is empty apologies and no action," Jennifer continued. "I understand that you may not have the authority to change the seating arrangements, but that's not the issue. The issue is how this has been handled. If you're unable to resolve it, then I need to speak to someone who can." For a moment, Sarah didn't say anything. She seemed to be weighing her options, looking for a way to deflect the issue, but Jennifer wasn't going to let her. She had been patient long enough. It was clear that Sarah wasn't going to be able to solve the problem on her own. Jennifer needed someone with the authority to make a real change. "I'll be reaching out to customer service once we land," Sarah said after a long pause. "They'll be able to address your concerns and provide a resolution." Jennifer nodded slowly, but she wasn't satisfied. "I'm not waiting until we land," she said, her voice steady. "I want a solution now. I expect more than just a vague promise. I expect action." Sarah's expression tightened. It was clear that the situation was making her uncomfortable, but Jennifer wasn't about to back down. "I'll speak with the captain and see what can be done," Sarah finally said, her tone softening as she acknowledged the severity of the situation. Jennifer's calmness remained intact, but she could feel the weight of the moment. She wasn't someone who liked confrontation, but she also wasn't someone who tolerated poor service. She had built her company on the idea that every person mattered, employees, customers, and partners alike. This was no different. She wasn't asking for special treatment, she was simply asking for what she was owed. As Sarah turned to leave, Jennifer sat down in her seat once again, staring out the window. The sky stretched out before her, vast and endless, and yet she felt confined by the situation. She wasn't just dealing with a minor inconvenience, she was confronting a systemic problem. This wasn't just about one flight crew's mistake, it was about a lack of accountability that ran deeper than just this one incident. Jennifer was used to dealing with difficult situations. As the CEO of her company, she faced challenges every day, but she always made sure to approach them with a clear mind and a level head. This situation, though, was different. It was about something more than just fixing a small problem. It was about setting a precedent. It was about ensuring that people took responsibility for their actions. She had dealt with difficult people before, but this wasn't a simple disagreement. She had been treated as if she didn't matter, and that was something she couldn't accept. Jennifer wasn't about to let this pass without making sure that the right people knew what had happened. She wasn't going to let the flight crew or anyone else get away with poor service. It wasn't just about the seat, it was about respect, professionalism, and doing the right thing. As the minutes passed and the flight continued, Jennifer knew that this wasn't the end. She had made her decision, and once the plane landed, she would take the next steps to ensure that the airline knew exactly how she felt. The flight crew may have thought they could get away with brushing her off, but Jennifer Adams didn't let things slide. She took action. For first class. Is there any way we can work something out? The agent looked apologetic but firm. I'm really sorry, but there's nothing I can do. We've overbooked, and unfortunately, you're one of the passengers who'll have to sit in business class. As the plane lifted off, Jennifer sat back in her business class seat, her mind swirling with thoughts. She wasn't one to get easily upset, but this situation was different. It wasn't just about the seat. It wasn't even about the inconvenience. It was about the way she had been treated. She was used to being respected, not just because of her position but because she treated others with respect too. That was how she built her company, by fostering trust, professionalism, and fairness. But today, she felt like she had been brushed aside, as if her concerns didn't matter at all. She glanced around the cabin, trying to distract herself. The flight attendants were moving about, serving drinks and snacks to the passengers, but there was no sense of urgency or professionalism in their movements. It was as if they were going through the motions without a care in the world. Jennifer's eyes narrowed as she watched them. She was still calm, but she wasn't going to let this slide. Not now. Not after everything she had worked for. She had heard the flight attendants chatting and laughing in the galley as the plane took off, their voices a mix of casual banter and idle chatter. She understood that they had jobs to do, but what bothered her was how they handled the situation. They had been dismissive when she first approached them, as if her request for a resolution was an inconvenience. She wasn't just any passenger, she was someone who had put in the hard work to get to where she was. She didn't demand special treatment, but she expected basic respect. It was the least she deserved. Jennifer's thoughts drifted to her company. She had spent years building it, hiring the best people, setting high standards, and striving for excellence. She had always made it clear to her employees that respect was non-negotiable. She didn't tolerate shortcuts or careless behavior, and that included in the services she used, whether it was a flight or a business partnership. She had always believed in fairness and consistency. So when the flight crew failed to meet even the basic expectations of customer service, it didn't sit well with her. She had already given them a chance. She had asked for help. She had even remained calm when the situation wasn't going her way. But the dismissive attitude had made it clear that they weren't interested in solving her problem. It was becoming evident that they didn't see her as a person, just another passenger who would accept whatever they were given. Jennifer could feel her frustration building, but she wasn't about to let it get the better of her. She took a deep breath and pulled out her phone to check her emails. She read through the messages, replying to a few important ones as the plane cruised through the skies. But even as she typed, her mind kept coming back to the flight crew. She couldn't shake the feeling that something needed to be done. 30 minutes passed, and Jennifer still wasn't happy with how things had unfolded. She had tried to let it go, to focus on work and move past it, but every time she thought about the flight crew's behavior, her frustration grew. They had been indifferent to her concerns, and that was something she could never accept. In her world, indifference wasn't an option. Everything had a solution, and if the crew wasn't willing to solve it, then she would take matters into her own hands. Jennifer stood up and made her way toward the galley. The flight attendants were busy serving the passengers, laughing together as if nothing were wrong. She approached one of them, a young woman who seemed caught off guard by her presence. "Excuse me," Jennifer said, her tone polite but firm. "I'd like to speak with the senior flight attendant, please." The young woman looked at her for a moment, unsure how to respond. She seemed a little intimidated by Jennifer's calm demeanor, but she quickly nodded and disappeared into the back to fetch the senior attendant. Minutes passed, and Jennifer stood there, her thoughts racing. She didn't want to make a scene. She wasn't interested in causing drama. She just wanted to be heard. That was all. She didn't want to be treated like a second-class passenger on a flight she had paid for in good faith. She wanted what she was promised. Finally, the senior flight attendant arrived. Her name tag read Sarah, and she had an air of professionalism about her, though Jennifer could sense the tension in the way she held herself. Sarah smiled, but it was clear that she wasn't happy about being called over. "How can I help you, ma'am?" Sarah asked, her voice smooth but slightly tense. Jennifer took a deep breath, keeping her tone steady. "I've already spoken to your colleague, and I've been told that my first-class seat has been given to someone else. I understand that these things happen, but I would appreciate it if you could help resolve this." Sarah nodded, though her expression remained neutral. "I understand your frustration, ma'am. But as I've explained, there's nothing we can do. The flight is overbooked, and the seats have already been reassigned. I'm sorry, but that's the situation." Jennifer felt a tightness in her chest. She had already heard this excuse, and it wasn't good enough. She needed more than just an apology, she needed a solution. "I'm not asking for anything more than what I've already paid for," Jennifer replied, her voice calm but firm. "I've been a loyal customer to this airline for years. I don't expect to be treated this way. Is there someone else I can speak with?" Sarah hesitated for a moment, clearly uncomfortable with the direction the conversation was taking. "I can escalate the issue to our customer service team once we land," she suggested. Jennifer felt her patience begin to thin. "I don't want to wait until we land. I'm asking for a resolution now. I'm not looking to make things difficult, but this isn't acceptable." Sarah's eyes flickered briefly, and for the first time, Jennifer saw a crack in the flight attendant's professional mask. She wasn't used to customers challenging her, especially in such a calm but determined manner. "I'm sorry, ma'am. But as I said, I don't have the authority to change the seating arrangements." Jennifer took a step back, her mind working quickly. She didn't want to escalate things unnecessarily, but she also wasn't going to let this go. She was used to dealing with difficult situations, and she knew how to handle them when necessary. This wasn't just about a seat on a plane, it was about respect, professionalism, and holding people accountable for their actions. "I understand," Jennifer said, her voice steady. "But I'm not just a passenger. I run a company, and I've spent years building a reputation based on professionalism and customer service. I expect the same from the services I use. I'll be following up on this issue." Sarah seemed to hesitate for a moment, then nodded, though there was no sign of resolution in her expression. Jennifer could tell that the flight attendant wasn't sure what to do, but in that moment, Jennifer knew that she had to take the next step. It wasn't just about getting what she deserved, it was about setting a standard for the service industry and making sure that people were held accountable for their actions. Jennifer paused, collecting her thoughts. She didn't want to make a scene. She wasn't the type to demand special treatment, but she also knew that she deserved better than this. After all, her business was built on attention to detail and efficiency, and she expected the same from the services she used. Still, she kept her voice steady and professional. "Is there anyone I can speak to about this? Someone in a higher position?" The agent hesitated for a moment, but then nodded. "I'll let the supervisor know you'd like to speak with them." As she waited for the supervisor to arrive, Jennifer glanced around the terminal. She saw families with small children, businessmen in suits, and a few young travelers with backpacks. Everyone was busy with their own lives, focused on their own destinations. It was a typical airport scene, and yet, today, something about it felt off. Maybe it was the frustration she was feeling, or perhaps it was the disbelief at being treated as just another passenger. A few minutes later, a supervisor arrived. She was a middle-aged woman, with short cropped hair and a name tag that read Marie. Marie greeted Jennifer with a warm smile, but there was a nervous energy in her eyes. It was clear she didn't want to deal with a customer who might cause a scene. But Jennifer wasn't angry, not yet anyway. "I understand there's been a mistake with my seating," Jennifer said, keeping her tone polite but firm. "I've paid for first class, and I'd like to know how we can fix this." Marie's smile faltered a bit. "I'm terribly sorry, Miss Adams. It seems we've overbooked the flight, and there's no first class seat available. We're happy to offer you a seat in business class." Jennifer frowned. She had heard the same line before, but now that it was happening to her, it felt different. It wasn't just about the seat. It was about the principle of the situation, the assumption that she would be okay with settling for something less than what she had already paid for. "I don't think you understand," Jennifer said, her voice remaining calm but with a hint of sharpness. "I paid for a first-class seat. I'm not asking for a free upgrade. I simply want what I've already paid for." Marie seemed to struggle with what to say next. "I know this is frustrating, Miss Adams, and I do apologize, but we're doing our best to accommodate everyone. It's just one of those things that happens with overbooking." Jennifer nodded, though she could feel her patience starting to wear thin. She had been calm, composed, and respectful. But it was becoming clear that the staff wasn't treating the situation with the seriousness it deserved. "I'm not asking for anything extra. I just want what I paid for," Jennifer repeated, trying to maintain control of the situation. Marie hesitated again, clearly uncomfortable with the conversation. "Unfortunately, that's the best we can do right now." The two women stood there for a moment, each trying to figure out the next step. The supervisor didn't seem to want to take any responsibility for the issue, and Jennifer felt increasingly frustrated. She had been polite, but it wasn't getting her anywhere. After what felt like an eternity, she reluctantly accepted the business class seat. But as she walked down the jet bridge, she couldn't shake the feeling that something wasn't right. She had made this flight a dozen times before without any issue. Why was it so different now? As she sat down in her business class seat, Jennifer looked around the cabin. She could hear the flight attendants chatting in the galley, laughing and joking as they prepared for takeoff. There was no urgency, no sense of professionalism. She had been overlooked, and now, she was left to sit in a seat that didn't reflect the price she had paid for a better experience. Jennifer knew this wasn't the end of the story. She had built a company from the ground up, and she had learned that problems like this weren't just isolated incidents, they were part of a larger system of failure. She wasn't just a passenger on a flight, she was a person who expected respect, professionalism, and a service that met the standard she had paid for. And today, that standard had been compromised. With a deep breath, Jennifer resolved to do something about it. She would get to the bottom of this, and if necessary, she would take matters into her own hands.